right, so we're moving into talking about proportions. So we got a couple vocabulary words. First, a proportion is just when we have equivalent ratios. Equivalent ratios. Okay, so an example of what that would be something like 2/3 is proportionate to 4/6, right? Their equivalent ratios, they form a proportion. So when we say something is proportional, when two ratios form a proportion. Okay, pretty straightforward. Last one is cross products. So cross product says that if I have a ratio of A over B, and I know that it's proportionate to C over D, then my cross products are also equal. So that means that A times D is going to be the same as B times C. And I'll show you what that means. So with my proportion up top, I have 2/3 equals 4/6. I know that this is a proportion, but if I wanted to check, I can check the cross product. So that means that I multiply across from each other. So I would have 2 times 6. And I want to know, does that equal 3 times 4? Well, 2 times 6 is 12. 3 times 4 is also 12. Cross products are equal. So it does form a proportion. That's what we mean by cross products. Okay, so first one is determining whether or not ratios form a proportion. So I'm going to tell whether 6/4 and 8/12 form a proportion. If they do, they're going to reduce down to the same ratio. So if I have 6/4, that's going to reduce down to 2 goes into both of those, so 3/2. Then if I have the proportion, or the ratio 8/12, well, 4 goes into both of those. 4 goes into 8 twice. 4 goes into 12 3 times. Oops, 2/3 is not equal to 3/2. This does not form a proportion. Right, that's all I'm looking for. Do they reduce down to the same value? So we can also decide whether or not some quantities are proportional. So I want to know, do X and Y form a proportion? Are they proportional? Well, I can do that by setting up some ratios. So I would have the ratio of 1/2 to 3. Well, if I can remember how to divide fractions, I do keep, change, flip, right? So that's the same thing as 1/2 times 1/3, which is equal to 1/6. My second point here, I can also see I don't even have to reduce. That's going to be 1/6. Then my third one is 3/2 over 9. So if I do my keep, change, flip, I would do 3/2 times 1/9. 3 goes into 9 3 times. 3 goes into 3 once. This also reduces down to 1/6. So yes, they are proportional. X and Y form a proportionate relationship. They are proportional. Okay, I want you to do a couple on your own then. So go ahead and look at these two ratios, these two fractions, and decide whether or not these two things form a proportion. When you're done, you can come back and check your answers with mine. Okay, so if you looked at these correctly, the first one is a yes. 1/2 is proportionate to 5/10. The second one should have gotten 2/3 and 3/4, which means that it's not proportionate. The third one that I wanted to talk about quick though, so you've got 10/3 and 5/6. I want to know whether those form a proportion. If you notice, I didn't do any math for that one, and here's why. Right, so if I look at my first one, 10/3, is my bigger number on top or it's on bottom? Well, my bigger number's on top, right? If I look at 5/6, my bigger number is on bottom. Is there any way that those two values are going to be equivalent? There's not, because they don't follow even the same pattern. So that is going to be a no right away. And then the fourth one, both of those reduce down to 5/4, so that is a proportion. Okay? So then we're going to talk a little bit more about cross products. Cross products are super helpful when we're talking about proportions. So let's go ahead and look at this first one. So cross products say that I would take 10 times 81 And if they form a proportion, that's going to be equal to 18 times 45. Okay, well, 10 times 81 is going to give me 810. Let's go ahead and figure out what 18 times 45 gives us. So we'll put up a calculator. 18 times 45 also gives me 810. So this is a proportion. This is yes. Okay, to do the same thing down here, cross multiply, I would have 1 times 105, which is 105. Is that equal to 15 times 7? Let's figure out what 15 times 7 is. 15 times 7 is 105. 105 equals 105. This does form a proportion. Okay, cross products are just super helpful. It's a really quick way of figuring out whether or not something is proportionate, and to figure out, like, if you have a missing piece of a proportion, cross products are really helpful with that as well. So we really have two separate methods that we can use to figure out whether or not things are proportionate. So your swimming laps of the pool, you swam your first 4 laps in 2.4 minutes. You then completed 16 laps in 12 minutes. I want to know, is that proportionate? Is that proportional? So we're going to start with 4 laps in 2.4 minutes. And I want to know, is that proportionate to 16 laps in 12 minutes? So the first method that we can use is we can look at unit rates. So unit rate in this case means how many laps per minute am I swimming? Well, 4 laps in 2.4 minutes, if I want to figure out 1, I'm just going to take 4 divided by 2.4, which is 1.6 repeating. So that means that's about 1.67 laps per minute. Now I have 16 laps in 12 minutes. Oops. Here we go. 16 laps in 12 minutes, so I'll take 16 divided by 12, 1.3 repeating. So by looking at their unit rates, they're not equal, right? So this is not a proportion. Okay, not a proportion. So that's one way that we could have solved this. Another way we could have solved it is with cross products. So we're using the same values, 4 laps in 2.4 minutes. I want to know, is that proportionate to 16 laps over 12 minutes? And we already know it's not, right? So obviously that's obvious in this case, but we just want to look at another way that we could have solved this. So cross products tell me that if these form a proportion, 4 times 12 would equal 16 times 2.4. Well, 4 times 12, I know that that's 48 already. 16 times 2.4, let's pull out our calculator, times 2.4 is 38.4. Well, these two things are very obviously not equivalent, so it confirmed what we already found out, that this is not a proportion. Either method works well. There are some times that one method is going to be easier than another, or more useful than another, but either one will get you to the same spot. Okay, so now we're going to use that, and we're going to see if these ratios are fair. So are these scenarios fair? We're going to do that by figuring out proportions. So in this first example, you pay $184 for 2 tickets. So this is an example where I think unit rate is a little bit more of a useful way to solve this. So let's figure out how much money did I pay per ticket? Well, 184 divided by 2 tickets means that I paid $92. Oops. I paid $92 per ticket. In the second scenario, then, I paid $266 for 3 tickets. Let's see what I paid per ticket now. So I paid $266, divided by 3. I paid $88 and about 67 cents for that one. So these are not equivalent, right? So this is not fair. This is unfair. It doesn't form a proportion. I paid less per ticket when I bought 3 than when I bought 2. Not fair. Let's look at another one. You get 75 points for answering 15 questions. Well, 75, I think that'll go in evenly. Sure does. It's 5 points per question. Then I'm going to do the same thing with the second scenario, 70 points per 14 questions. Do the same thing, we'll do 70 divided by 14. It's going to also give me 5. 5 points per question. Is this fair? Yeah, it is. It's fair. They form a proportion. They're equivalent. Okay, here's one where we're not even going to do math and we're going to get it. It'll be exciting. So, here we go. I've got 24 football cards in the first scenario and 15 baseball cards. I want to know, is that equivalent to 20 football cards to 32 baseball cards? Well, let's stop and think about this for a second before we even do anything. So in the first scenario, 24 football cards, 15 baseball cards. Which one do I have more of? Well, I have more football cards in this case, right? In the second case, 20 football cards and 32 baseball cards. Whoop. Now, I have more baseball cards than I do football cards. Is this going to be fair? No. Not fair. They are not equivalent. These do not form a proportion. They're never going to form a proportion. Okay? Awesome. Just a few more, and then we'll be done with this. So, I want to know whether or not these two ratios are equivalent, and if they're not, I'm going to change them so that they are. Okay? So, let's look at the first one. I think that this is a helpful one to look at unit rates. So if I have $5 for 2 boxes, what does that mean I'm going to have for 1 box? Well, 5 divided by 2 is $2.50. So every box is going to be $2.50. So then I would have $7.50 for 3 boxes. That one is a little bit tougher to do in my head. So $7.50 divided by 3 boxes. Oh, that's also $2.50. Yes, these form a proportion, right? $2.50 per box equals $2.50 per box. They are equivalent. Okay? For the next one, let's go ahead and do cross products for this one. So $2.50 times 4 should just be 1,000. I'm just going to double check and make sure. Yep. So I'm going to have $2.50 times 4. Well, let's just write the whole thing up. $2.50 times 4. I want to know, is that equal to 300 times 3 1/3? Well, I just figured out that this was 1,000. And when I'm multiplying 3 1/3, I think it's easiest to break these up. So if I just did 300 times 3, well, 3 times 3 is 9, so that's 900. And then 1/3 of 300, if I take 300 divided by 3, one of those 3's is going to be 100. So then I have 900 plus 100, whoop, that equals 1,000. We're good. Forms a proportion. Yes. Awesome. That's what we want. All right, last one. This one's a little trickier. We're going to do cross products again because that's what makes the most sense. So we have 200 times 3 1/2. I'm going to use the same method I did before. Well, let's do this other one. And then I would have 175 times 5. Let's do 175 times 5 in a calculator, because that one's going to be a little harder to do mental math. 875. So if I'm doing 200 times 3.5, well, 200 times 3 is going to give me 600. Half of 200 is 100. So that's going to give me a total of 700. Whoops, they do not form a proportion. So now we have a couple options. It says to change the second one, but I want to change the first one because I just think that is a little bit simpler. So this second one, I have 5 hours in 200 miles. Well, this one's kind of nice because I can simplify this one really easily. 5 hours, 200 miles. You should notice that 5 goes into 200, so I can put 1 hour on top. 5 goes into 200 40 times. So in 1 hour, I've done 40 miles. And these now are equivalent ratios. Okay, now it forms a proportion.